you have to hit okay. Anyway.
That's it. Just turn me on, turn me up, and turn me loose.
And we're live.
Hey, y'all.
How's everybody doing?
Hey, everybody. Happy 4th of July, Independence Day. Hope everybody had a good one. Thoughts and prayers for everybody in Texas that went through that horrific flood. How many people you got in?
I don't know. I'm trying to get White to see chat.
Well, just so everybody knows, Squirrel's internet is iffy. My main internet is out. I'm doing this on the phone, and it keeps having problems. So if this thing goes to hell, sorry, we'll redo it.
I had to connect straight to my hotspot just to try to come in, and I still can't come all the way in, and it's buffering.
You can blame it on me.
No.
First time here. But
y'all know my opinion on what's going on, but I ain't gonna start that.
Well, for everybody watching the show, first of all of the moderators and everybody in chat, hello, thank you for being here. Crap, there goes mine again. But anyway, we brought Mike out with us because Mike is used to doing this. He would you say you're on Texas front? Who are you on recently?
Me? I did had a Understanding Bigfoot podcast. I did 37 episodes over the course of a couple years, a few years ago, and I hadn't done one on that format in a couple of years. But I'm a regular Wednesday nights with Grizzly Chris, Bigfoot Outlaw, here on YouTube and other avenues. Every Wednesdays at 8 Central. We're live, and I've been doing that for a couple of years since then. It's just easier. It's easier to have somebody else do all the work and just hop on, right?
Right.
Well, you know that firsthand today, Spencer.
For everybody that's unfamiliar with you, now I've been watching you for several years now. Whenever you started with you and Susan, and then I caught the one with your sister, and I started watching you all the time, keeping up with everything that was happening out there, because you guys were getting a lot of activity at one point. But for everybody that's not familiar with you, would you kind of briefly recap how you got into this and where it started at?
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that briefly, but I'll try. I've always been a Bigfoot enthusiast. Just from the time I was a kid, back in the 70s, back in the late 70s, got a book in the library that said On the Track of Bigfoot, and read that book, and I was probably junior high age, 7th grade, 8th grade, something like that. And I was fascinated by the book, but everything that they had in the book was Pacific Northwest stuff. It was Patterson Gimlin. It was Jerry Crew. It was stuff out of British Columbia, the Albert Osman story. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Those things are probably up there somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, and there's a lot of evidence posted in that book. And I just kind of, you get in high school and you get doing other things. You're in sports and college and different things, married, family, and you forget all about that stuff. Totally forget all about it. And then when the cable shows started coming on, 20 years ago, and I'd start watching these cable shows and documentaries and things like that, it kind of brought it back to me that, hey, this stuff's kind of cool. And again, I didn't think, well, it kind of led me to some of these websites to where it looked like there's Missouri activity. And I thought that's kind of cool, but most of it was not around me and in Southeast Missouri. And then fast forward to December 2019, I'm out with my son. My son went out squirrel hunting, conservation area about 20 miles north of the house. And he just got through with college and got through playing college baseball. And we had a whole lifetime of sports together. He wanted to do outdoor stuff together, and I thought that was great. I just didn't go with him that particular day. He came back. He was on my back deck cleaning a squirrel or two, and we were talking. And he talked about the footprints that he saw up in the woods. And he was describing the foot. He said, let's go take a look at them. And that was when I saw my first, legitimate big footprints, 17 and a half inches long by 8 inches wide, 4 to 5 clear steps, left foot, right foot, toes, 5 foot between steps. Everything just lined up to where this is Sasquatch, because it can't be anything else. But what are they doing up in this is close to my house. What are they doing here? And that was then it was like, at that point, it was like, I've got to find out more about what's going on with these things. If they're here and nobody knows it, how many people hunt in those woods and never see the footprints because they're not looking for them? And so, and my goodness, shortly after that, when COVID came along and they gave us work off with pay, and you had every day to go up to the woods and go look around. I was up there 4 or 5 times a week, just looking for more evidence and finding it. And that was the thing. And then different size footprints, different size stride lengths, different, starting to hear the sounds, the day watchers out there whooping at you and breaking the sticks and doing things like that. And it just was so fascinating. And then that eventually got into going out at night, into some overnight camping and having up close and personal interactions. And it just kind of hooks you in, doesn't it?
Oh man, I'm freezing up. I think we all froze up on that, but yeah.
Well, I'm not froze. Maybe. No, that. Maybe. What do you say, Spencer? Moving. Yeah, but
It's my.
he's got that nickel internet. He's gonna have to stay off the Spice Channel. He's running up his internet.
Well,
so have you actually had a real good sighting of one of these things?
Yeah, that thing is that came about. It took about 4 years or so. That was December of 23 was when I had my best sighting.
Really?
And now I had probably April of 23, I had one standing right outside the tent at night overnight, and I could just see a silhouette, and he was right. I mean, we were 6 feet from each other, except there was a tent separating us, and I kind of froze up on him. I didn't say any. I couldn't get anything out, and I just kind of froze. I'm like, wow, you're right there. And then he gave me a hump, and then he would turn around, walked off, and back into the woods. And but then December 23, I had probably about 30 yards, and we were face to face at about 30 yards for about, my guess is about 15 seconds. A male, every bit of 10 foot tall, I would say.
Well, man, look, we're not going to let you off with that vague a description. Walk us through that. Tell us what was going on.
Well, here's how that came about. Through the course of me involved in this stuff and doing the podcasting and things like that, there was a family that started experiencing Bigfoot activity on their property while they're trying to have a productive farm, and one of the members started reaching out on these groups and found out, hey, this guy's podcasting not too far from me, and says, how do you deal with these things? Like I knew, right? But I'm gonna act like I know. So, so let's go. So they invited me up to the place. I went up to the place, and we're gonna leave everything, names and everything, anonymous, because they have an ongoing business with their farm and an ongoing habituation with the Sasquatches, and they don't want to jeopardize any of it. So, but I went up, and they've got a poultry pen, they've got greenhouses and tomatoes and different types of vegetation, and the thing is that the Sasquatches were coming in helping themselves to their harvest. But they weren't cleaning their harvest out. They were just, and they thought people were just coming and stealing things at first, and until they saw one, and then they're like, oh, then they're like, what do we do? So my advice to him was work with them. I said my best advice is to work with them, share with them, set some.
What the crap?
But don't try to run them off, because if they don't want to be run off, they can make your life much more miserable than you want to deal with. And you're probably not going to win that battle. So we went up there. I went up there. We walked around. I had my buddy, Matt L. Frank, who doesn't do any shows, but he's side by side with me on a lot of these experiences. And I suggested a gifting area where we take a bucket and take this bucket up to the edge of the woods, away from the house, away from the greenhouses, and we set up a gift where we're going to regularly gift, let them have their share in the bucket, and then I would every couple of weeks get up there and supply apples and jar things like peanut butter, things that they're not getting, supplementing with everything, and that was a project that went on we did it for a year. I said I would do it for a year and then let you be on your own. I don't get up there much anymore because they're so much busier with their farm. Their farm has become much more productive than they ever thought, and the Sasquatches are happy. It seems like, and the family that lives there, but it was after about a year of that. And they'd leave me glyphs, and I'd get up there, it'd be a new little glyph next to the bucket, and they'd put it there, and after about a year, December, I went up there in December of 23, and I went up there with the purpose to gift the bucket, and the family that owned the farm, the husband and wife and the son that runs the farm, we were all together. We all walked up there and talking and catching up and things like that. And then my friend, the lady of the house, started talking up in the woods as if she were talking to friends, you know. And I said, are they up there? She says, yeah. She says, come over here and take a look. Now, prior to this point, I saw during my other times there, probably on three different occasions, I saw one of the juvenile males as a tree peeker at about 50 to 70 yards, peeking around, bobbing that head back and forth from a tree, and that's about all I could get. So I had seen that, but I hadn't been too close. They'll stay. I'm a stranger still. So I went over to where she was at, looked up in the woods. Now she said there was 2 young ones playing with this adult male, but as soon as I walked over there, they went into hiding. The young ones went into hiding. So he, in my opinion, he showed himself to me, but he wasn't comfortable letting me see the young ones yet. So he had them hide. So as I saw him, and he was on all fours, but we're looking at each other. I'm 6'5". We're looking at each other in the eye as he's on all fours. We're eyeball to eyeball, and his head and shoulders are 3 times of me. 3 of me. Big conical head goes straight to the shoulders, and at least 3 of me. And as you guys, I've met you guys, Greg and Spencer. I know. I'm a good sized person. And he starts swaying a little bit back and forth. And I was always told, well, if they sway with him. So I kind of swayed with him a little bit. And I said I was very comfortable with him because the family was there with me, and I knew they were all, cordial in their relationship with each other. If it had just been me hunting in the woods and I run across something like this, it'd been, it'd been a totally different situation. I was very comfortable. I said, hey, you guys are wonderful. You got a great family. It's been my pleasure to help treat you guys with these apples and stuff like that this past year. It's been awesome. And then, but the last thing he did is he gave me a head nod. He nodded his head at me and turned around, stayed on all fours, and meandered back up into the woods. And two or three crawl steps up and through there, I couldn't see him anymore. Totally out of sight. But it was a wonderful, very chill experience. I felt very, very honored to have it.
Well, I'm gonna ask the question that 9,000 people's gonna ask before the show ends. Why didn't you get a picture?
The last thing that crossed my mind at that time was to take a picture, because he was doing this out of respect for me, and I thought, I'm not, and I felt at ease at that point to pull my phone out of my pocket and take it. I thought, I'm not going to do it. It's kind of like if you run if you see somebody famous, famous professional athlete or famous celebrity, and I do that from time to time. I thought, I'm not going to be the one that hounds them for an autograph. I'm just going to be nice to them and say, hey, But I just thought, I'm not doing it, and because everything I had worked for to get this type of experience, I thought, well, if I violate his trust, I may not ever get it back. Now, the time where the Sasquatch was right outside my tent, about a few months before that, when he was right outside my tent with the silhouette, I mean, the thought unzipped it. Boy, what would happen if I unzipped the tent? What would happen if I unzipped the tent and took a picture? Well, am I going to point something at this 9 foot tall? How would he feel if I pointed something at him?
Were you kind of second guessing your choices of staying in something made out of fabric?
Well, I always thought should I have gone to try to get a better interaction?
Yeah.
And but my answer has always been, how would he have reacted?
Yeah.
How would he have reacted? I don't know how he would have reacted. He may have shook my hand. He may have reached out and smacked me harder than I've ever been smacked before. He may have ran, and I don't want him to think they have to run. If I'm out it's just one of those things that I just didn't do any of it.
Well,
And this,
the worst case of that would have been he would have perceived that as an act of aggression and returned aggression.
that thought crossed my mind, and I don't want to make them think that of me, especially. And and you asked that. My dad asked the same thing. Why didn't you take a picture of it? So because I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Well,
For
then
me,
he goes, well, then maybe I would believe you. I said, well, you know what? I don't do this stuff for you to believe me. I said, I don't care if you believe me or not. I do it for me. So,
well, the encounter you had with that's way out of the norm. They won't be 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 5,000 that's gonna have that encounter where you get to stand there and just look at it for 15 seconds.
right.
What most people don't understand is even a really good encounter only lasts 3 to 5 seconds.
Very,
It's
very
not
brief.
that it's very brief,
I,
and for me, it's like overwhelming. Even though I've had multiple encounters and sightings, and the last thing on my mind is getting a picture of anything. I'm trying to soak it up, and I'm focused on what I'm looking at. So I mean, I could understand
there,
if that was what happened, even with your encounter.
Right. I don't even set up trail cams. I'm not even, I go out for interactions, and I try to study them. I try to understand them, for lack of a better term. I try to want to get an understanding of what they're about. I don't really want, I'm not out to prove anything to anybody.
Yeah. You usually get more anyways when you don't take stuff with you.
Well, that was my one of the guys I'd camp with, who's since moved off to Oklahoma on me. But we did, because we'd get out there early on. We'd set up the perimeter for trail cams and all these recorders and everything like that. And then when the weekend's over, either nothing would come in, or when they did come in, those recorders somehow didn't work right. And I just thought, we decided one day, I said, let's just, us and them, let's just put all this stuff away, us and them, and see what kind of interactions we got. And then we started getting good interactions.
this is a good point to bring up. Well, this is a good time to bring it up right now. Number one, everybody wants to look. I don't want to have Mike go over every single thing that he's experienced, because it would take a long time. Crap. Yeah, freeze up again.
No, we can hear you.
We heard the first part of it.
Okay. Well, anyway, hold on. Let me see if I can turn my camera off. How about that? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
How about now?
Yep.
You look better, Spencer.
Here's the thing. You can go back and use a lot of the stuff with Mike on the shows that he's been on. And you can go through that, reach out to him. And
Can't hear you, Spencer.
Of course, we got to cover the experiences that he's been through. But I think it's fascinating if you'll let him talk about it, if he's willing to talk about it. I think it's fascinating the journey that he's gone on with these things, where he started out going like everybody else, looking for them, setting up game cameras, trying to interact with them, and some of the changes in his thought process on these things over the past little while. So, Mike, if you would you talk about that a little bit, like the difference of where you started and your mindset about it and the way that you think about it now?
Yeah, I mean the difference. I guess when you start, that's you go into it. You want to get the picture. You want to do all that stuff, and we'd go and um, try to do things like that. And I mean, I mean, you've been out there fully charged camera equipment go blank on you. Um, perfect audio. I mean, we set out audio recorders, and sometimes we've got good audio over the years too. But sometimes you set the audio recorder out, and you'd pick up everything. But when the Sasquatch has the good vocalization, it has an error on it, and it doesn't pick it up. And I don't. There's something that they're capable of doing there, obviously, that I don't know what it is that can shut that stuff down if they choose to do so. But to me, it's just, I love the interactions and I love teaching other people about it. So many people say, "Oh, if I didn't know you, I would think you're nuts. But I know you. You're not that kind of person." I said, "Well, come out with me. I'll show you what." And I've taken several people to the woods and shown them evidence. They say, "Well, am I going to see a Bigfoot?" It's probably not. I'm going to show you evidence, though. I show you a 20-inch footprint, and you can get down and you can get your hands in that footprint and feel those toes and go through everything in that footprint, and then you draw your own conclusions as to what's making it, and then if you're lucky, you'll start hearing some of the vocalizations, from the area, which a lot of times, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times to get them out there to do that. But it's and then and here's the funny thing, guys, and you guys have all experienced this, I'm sure, is when they hear that first vocalization, they're okay when they see the footprints, but when they hear that first vocalization within 50 yards, they're like, "Where's the car? Where's the truck? We got to go." No, it's what we come out here for. We don't have to go anywhere. So, but why? Then my question is, why are you in such a big hurry to leave for what you're trying to tell me doesn't exist? So,
I can't tell if I'm froze up or not.
No, you're here.
I'm hearing you, Spencer. I could keep talking, but I thought, well, somebody's got a question or something like that.
No, I guess Spencer put that up and didn't mean to. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. The computer's going crazy.
So somebody asking, and a couple people asking where I'm doing my work at. It's southeast Missouri. I live in Cape Girardeau County, which is an active county. That's about 100 miles south of St. Louis on the Mississippi River. The sighting I talked about on the farm, that's in Madison County, which is on the eastern edge of the Mark Twain National Forest, and that's probably about 50 to 60 miles to the northwest of me. So those are the 2 primary areas that I've gone to and found the evidence. But there's a trove of it down here. I will say,
this is ridiculous.
I will say, in the early years of podcasting, one thing that somebody says I'm not too far from Miguel. Miguel's a good friend. I've done about 4 documentaries with him over the past few years, and hope to do some more. We talk about doing them all the time, but I don't have the time he has to get out there and do it all the time. But talk about Miguel with Sasquatch Theories. He is a good friend and does a great job, boots on the ground. But I, through getting in this podcasting, getting guests and stuff like that, I was fortunate enough to get Tom Cantrell on my Understanding Bigfoot show, and actually he came on there about 3 or 4 times, and I've done several other podcasts with him since on other networks and that. But Tom became a very good friend just in this industry, and he's in his 80s now, and his health is starting to fail him a little bit. But Tom's written 16 books on the subject.
Wow.
I'd highly recommend his book Sasquatch to Proof, where he scientifically points everything out that would prove the existence in a court of law without having to have that quote unquote body. But his latest book that he put together this spring is right here, and this is a shameless plug on my part. It's called Sasquatch America, Tom Cantrell. And it's out there on Amazon. It's out there on his website, tomcantrell.com. And he took about 20-something people and had them contribute their stories in this book. And he asked me to contribute my story. So most of what I talk about is in this book with my chapter. And he also asked me if I'd write the foreword to the book. So I don't know, Greg, Spencer, Misty, if you guys read books a lot, but I teach English for a living. So I've read a lot of books in my lifetime, but I don't think I ever read a foreword to a book. I'd always skip it and get to the book. And he asked me to write the foreword to the book. So I said, well, okay, how do I do that? I've never even read one. So I had to figure that out. But anyway, that's on his website. It's on Amazon, and they're out there. And I enjoyed being a contributor to that. My sister Becky also has a contributing chapter to that book as well. So
if you'll show it again, I'll see if I can find a link to put up for it.
Yeah, just you can find the link off Amazon for sure. Sasquatch America, Tom Cantrell.
All right, thank you.
And so I got real excited to be a part of that. So it's in most things are in there that I experienced. I went back and reread my chapter. I thought, boy, I left that out. I left a few things out, but so maybe I just need to write a book one of these days. I don't know. So,
well, Mike, we go down a lot of roads with this conversation, but one of the things, because you learn to interact about seeing them and interacting with them, would you be willing to?
You're cutting out on my end. Right, if somebody heard the question, can you repeat the question?
I didn't catch any of that.
Greg, did you catch that?
Forget this. Never mind. I'm a hop off here. I'll be in chat.
No, I hear you clear now. Go ahead and ask the question, and we'll go there.
We can hear you now. Froze up on him, giving the Spock sign or something. I don't know. Man, I'm telling you,
because of all the heat. You know what I mean? Like, the heat waves and things, and like the Oh, he's frozen.
Well,
Sherry said she couldn't get hers to work either, and she's like a mile and a half from me.
Well, a holiday weekend, there's probably a lot of extra people that's off work, and probably a bunch of people because it's hot at home and they're inside, and all of them's overloading the internet. So that's probably a bunch of it. That and Spencer lives, he's got to go somewhere to just get to nowhere. He's kind of out there by his lonesome.
He's in West Virginia, right, Spencer?
No, he's in Virginia.
Virginia, okay.
Yeah, Virginia. Yep. Misty, where she lives up in Tennessee, she lives pretty much in town, but undoubtedly their internet is hardwired with baling twine or something. I don't know.
Well, we've been having a lot of trouble, and our power and stuff's been flickering a lot lately too, where it's been getting so hot, just having a lot of power surges. So I'd say that's a lot of the issue right now. Because my hotspot, usually I can connect to it and run off of it, and it'll be fine. And it's doing the same thing. It's just buffering and kicking me out. And I guess where I'm connected to it on my computer, I don't know what happened earlier. My whole computer just started going nuts, and then it just kicked me plumb out of StreamYard.
Wow, I don't know that. So I guess, Misty, we're going blind. We got to come up with questions.
That's what's so bad because I apologize, Mike and everybody. We didn't even know who the guest was until this morning, or actually until we came on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know
Especially,
you've been talking to Spencer, and so I really don't even know. I don't know what to ask you or where to even go with it.
well, I mean, Misty's mushroom one, and I'm mushroom two because Spencer keeps us in the dark and feeds us shit. So here we are.
Well, let me talk about two things. Then I'll talk about two things, and if you think I'm now, one thing I did, I did about a little over a year ago. Again, I work at a high school. These kids have all got social, they stalk everybody. They know what you're, if you don't, even if you're not, if Bigfoot's not part of my public life, they know it's part of my life. And these kids are out in the country too. They're out there where the Sasquatches are, and they're telling me, "You're crazy, you're nuts." And then one of the students, a little over a year ago last spring, came to me. She was a senior, and she says, "Some of us want you to do something for us before we graduate." What's that? Take us to the woods and show us your evidence. We want to believe you. Now, male teachers got to be very careful about taking female students to the woods, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and so I said, okay. I said, if we're gonna do this, we got to do it right. So let's get a group and let's do a school-sponsored field trip. So the school sponsored the field trip. We took a school bus. Okay, everything official. I had my buddy Matt meet me at the woods, and I said, I'm going to take you out. I'm going to show you how to find the tracks. So I know where they're at. I know where they walk. It's a conservation area. It's public, and the and I somebody asked Mark Roberts, my friend Mark asked how was the permission slip worded. It was we're going on an outing to study wildlife or something like that. It's like,
Yeah.
and the so I found the first Bigfoot track, and I showed them, got them to all there, get down there, feel the toes. Now this is why it's a Bigfoot track, because of the length of the footprint. I said probably about 5 feet one direction or 5 feet the other. You should see another impression, or be able to feel another. Sometimes they're not all clear tracks, but if you look hard enough, you can see what the impression was. And so I showed them how to do that. And then they went off in groups. There was 11 altogether that made the trips. They went off in groups of 2 and 3, and they went off and hey, I think here's a footprint here. Hey, I think here's a footprint here. So they started finding their own footprints. 16 inches, 18 inches, 14 inches, all these different increments. So then they're starting to see the picture that there are more than one Bigfoot walking these paths. And then they kind of, as energetic students, went off up ahead of us, and in one of the creek bottoms, they found just a perfect casting 17-inch print by 9 wide. And we brought and I had casting material. I hope hopefully we find something we can cast. And so I had the kids get the casting material out, read the directions, mix it up, pour it in, cast that thing. The LBL thing last year, I brought the cast to the LBL thing. I think most of you guys had a chance to see that here on the panel. And so 11 high school students that day ended their day thinking, hey, this stuff is legitimate.
That's
we went
awesome.
out and saw the evidence. This stuff is legitimate, and I think that was just an awesome experience.
Well, have you ever had any of your students? Have you ever had any of your students? Has that an encounter?
Oh yeah, one of my students and he just finished his freshman year of high school, and they've got a farm, a few hundred acres up there in Bulliger County. He and another student, and this was a year ago, not this past fall, but the fall before, they had a sighting. They saw one when they were out with their bows and arrows doing some deer hunting, scouting for the rifle season. And they came back to school. They told me they saw one, and my first thought is they might be pulling my leg. So I started asking them specific questions, and depending on the answers they give me, I'm going to say this may or may not be legitimate. And I kind of come to the conclusion they probably saw one. And then I told the kid, I said, I need to get up there and look around. Well, it's private ground. And he goes home and tells his parents, and they're like, you're crazy, you know? And so this goes on for some time. And this past year, this past winter, we had about 8 or so inches of snow with a snowstorm, and the young man tracked one. He tracked a snow track well over 100 yards, and he put it on video, and his mother was with him as they were tracking it, and she's trying to justify maybe that's it. You know, she's thinking of everything that could possibly be, you know, even though the feet were like 16, 17 inches long, that might be a deer, you know, and stuff like that, because yeah, it's not that she's stupid. She's just trying to think it can't be Bigfoot, right? So they went, and he tells his buddy, he says, I'm telling you, Mr. Scott can help us figure this out. He can help us figure this out. So a week or so later, we're at a high school basketball game, and I see his dad, and I know these people, and his dad says to me, he says, when are you coming out to the farm?
Wow.
He said, we need you to come out to the farm. So by the time I get out to the farm, all the snow's melted. So what's my purpose of being out here? Well, we want to confirm that that this is what he says. It's Bigfoot and stuff like that out here. And I said, well, the only thing I can do is go find more evidence today. And so I told the guy, you know, take us. I said, you got a creek bottom? You got a creek bottom on the property? Oh yeah, you know. I said, well, take us to the creek bottom, because they'll obviously run the creek bottoms. And we found some prints. We've actually found, probably over the course, I showed him and his brother how to find the prints, how to track the prints over the course of like a 40-yard stretch in the creek bottom. We saw about 6 or 7 16-inch footprints, where they weren't all together, right? We'd see one here, maybe a couple of stride lengths. We wouldn't notice the impression. Then you get to that 4th or 5th stride length, and you see the impression again. And then at the end, when we found all the different prints at about 40 yards apart, you could snap a chalk line in the direction he's going with the prints, and you got about 6 or 7 prints. So showing them that, I said, you know, that they come through here. So I asked the parents. They got 500 head of cattle on their farm. I said, you do have Sasquatch living around here. They come through here. I said, I assume they're leaving your cattle alone. You're never missing any cattle? They said, oh no, it's so funny you say that. They said, we'll have about 3 a year just go missing without a trace. Never a full-grown cow, or never a baby calf, but always the mid-size. Just go missing without a trace. No, you know, if it's a pack of coyotes or a mountain lion, there'd be blood, there'd be hair, there'd be this, nothing. Fences aren't torn down, nothing. Just missing. And then we'll put out a thing with all the neighbor cattle farmers. Anybody see our calf, and then they all have 1 or 2 a year go missing.
Hey, Mike.
Easier to carry the smaller ones, but you get more meat if you get the ones that are a little heftier. It's the same way with the chickens.
Do they ever find them with a? Will they ever find them with a broken tail or broken ears, torn ears,
They
broken
haven't said
tail?
that if they have or not. They told basically what my theory is that they are feeding their family without trying to be noticed. They get one here, you got 500 head, you get one here, they get one there. You're not going to make a big deal out of it, and they're getting fed. And then if they're not going to get 10 from you, if they need 10 for the year, they might get 1 or 2 from the other neighbor and 1 or 2 from the other neighbor, and put them together. And that's kind of, and they're staying discreet by doing that. And they're, and then they're thinking with the video trackway in the snow and what I showed the kids and the footprints and putting all that together, they're thinking, man, these are some incredible beings. And I told them, I said, you're better off letting them do it, because they're leaving you alone and they're thriving with their food. So yeah, we do have other students that have encounters. They have activity, and the more now that they hear, they come forward and they'll tell me about it and stuff like that. So
Well, I got to ask you because everybody else is going to want to know. And all your researching for boogers and stuff like that, have you ever run up on any orbs or any UFOs?
I've seen one UFO up in the woods where we go. Now that thing was multiple thousands of feet up in the sky. I really don't think that was related in any way, shape, or form with the Bigfoots. I have seen on a handful of occasions the orbs, and the orbs with the Sasquatch activity. Now, this goes back to, you go back to when I started doing this, in 2020. If I said you orb people are crazy, but when you start seeing it for yourself, yeah, and somebody's telling me, you sure you don't believe all that orb stuff? I say, hey, I'm telling you, I laid eyes on it. I saw it. We've got pictures of Sasquatch holding the orb, literally.
Really?
Literally. And if I had a cell phone number, I could text it to you. But we have that, and that was right in our vicinity, within 40 yards of us, and I've seen green orbs, and I've seen like light bulb colored orbs, and I think one time it was an orangish colored orb, but I have seen them, and they've always been Now, I've been around Sasquatch activity without orbs, but every time I've seen the orbs, it's been with their activity.
Wow.
So. There's a lot of people that says that, that they have the activity. I know we were seeing it too. Whenever we were looking at something, we were seeing like 2 things across the creek that looked about the size of, Kane said by the thermal, they were probably about the size of a car door. And me and Mark was watching a green some kind of green orb or something coming straight in at us while he was, looking at 2 over here. Right. So,
yeah. So, I can't explain the connection, but it's there. So,
well, the other question I got to ask.
How big do you think they were?
The ones I saw, the one was about 40 yards. Both of them probably, the 2 green ones were both about 40 yards, and I'm going to say probably the size of a softball, maybe a little bit bigger than a softball, but not much bigger.
Wow.
Where in Missouri are you?
I'm in southeast Missouri. Cape Girardeau is where I live, in the city of Cape Girardeau. So
Yeah,
We're,
I live for. You know where Kirksville is?
oh yeah, I know where Kirksville's at.
Yeah, I live
Used to be
just
Northeast Missouri State
about
University. Now it's Truman State.
right. I worked the last 14 years of my career. I was there at Truman State,
Okay.
and but I was up there in northern Missouri for 18 years in northeast Missouri, and yeah, I'm eating lunch, late lunch. But anyway, uh, we used to have three different kind of orbs on our property. We live, you know where Thousand Hill State Park is up there?
I do not. I'm not too
Southeast,
familiar with
east
the area out in the countryside.
Okay.
I've
Yeah,
been to Kirksville a few times.
a few miles out. I lived out between Kirksville and Novinger,
Okay.
and our property backed up to the state park, and we had three different types of orbs that we used to see on our property, and I had seen stuff that I thought might have been an orb in the past, but there, I was just, you know, we saw them quite often. We had little small red ones that were just a little bit larger than a lightning bug, and they would blink on, they would turn on, and they would fly usually in one direction or the other. And for some reason, right there, it seemed to be most all of them went north and south, or north, either south to north or north to south. But they would turn on and they would fly along for maybe 50 to 100 yards and then just turn off.
Yeah.
And then we used to see them that were sort of like you said, like the color of a Coleman lantern, the old style Coleman lanterns that you put the fuel in and pump it up. We used to see those, and they were about the size of a soccer ball. And we would see them, and I've gotten up less than 10 feet away from one of those a couple of times. When you'd get real close to them, you could hear a very, very, very faint sizzling noise, very faint, right before they'd turn off. If we tried to get too close to them, they'd just turn off right in front of us. One time, myself and another guy, Robert, I see that Robert D. Greg, you got some way of getting his phone number? Robert, send your email to Greg, and he'll forward it to me. If you can do that. You got an email up there, or is there a site email, Greg, for Woodwalkers?
He still have to put it up. That, or he can send me a message on Facebook Messenger.
Yeah, that's okay. Do that. Anyway, we had the one. We managed to chase one down one time, and we got up within about, like I said, both of us got up within 5 to 6 feet of it. Maybe not quite that much, 6 to 8 feet of it. And we had it in between us, and it just, it made that little sizzling noise and gone. And
please tell me how big a damn toe sack you had.
Didn't have none. We were deer hunting and saw it. When we thought it was a poacher that was coming in on our property, and we chased it down. But then there was another one that we never got close to it that we'd see that was bright white, and it was about the size of a softball.
Yeah,
like you said. I got close enough to it, I could tell about what size it was.
Wow.
Yeah, the first time I saw them, there was the bright white, and I would think, I looked through the woods, I'd see those orbs, and I'm thinking, well, okay, on the other side of those woods, there's a gravel road. I thought, that's a car coming up. Those are cars coming up, and the cars wouldn't come up. And then it dawned on me what I was seeing. And that was the first time that we had seen those. And then And then here in Cape County, I've seen the green ones on a couple of occasions, different places. And I actually do know a couple of girls that they chased one in their yard one time that was floating around, and they live in a place where there's also a lot of Bigfoot activity as well, and they chased that thing around the yard, never could catch it, but they were up close with it for a long period of time. But so yeah, I've noticed that you ask about the.
Are you anywhere near? Are you anywhere near where they used to have all the Momo sightings back?
The Momo sightings were actually closer to you. Those were up north of St. Louis on the Mississippi River back in the early 70s.
That's right. You're right. You're right.
Just south of Hannibal. I'm down, like I said, southeast Missouri. I never had any idea they were down. I would have never thought it until I walked across evidence one day, and then 5 years ago, and then I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they're here, and but because I remember the Momo sightings, and I remember when I first learned about Bigfoot, and I went back to those Momo sightings, and of course we heard about that in the news and everything like that. I thought, well, that's probably what that was, but that's about all I thought about it at the time. So, but my sister, she saw a white one, Coonbo, and she was on Highway 36 going across there about 25 miles west of Hannibal when she saw it at night, and
near that's right at Monroe City.
Yeah, real close to Monroe City.
Right there at Monroe City. I used to live when I very first moved to Missouri. I lived south between Monroe City and is it Perry? This down there.
Perry, Missouri. Perry, Missouri is up there.
Yeah. I lived in between Monroe City and Perry, Missouri.
Right.
For a while, and we had weird stuff go on down there on occasion in that Salt River watershed. In fact, we used to have a lot of activity out in an area there near Mark Twain Lake. A lot of activity.
Mark Twain, yeah. So that wasn't too far from where she saw that on the median of the road back in 2017 or something like that. It was a few years back, but she saw this, plane is, in the headlights of her vehicle, and it was like, whoa.
Well,
but
one night we were out running around, had a guy from work that was real skeptical, and I told him, I said, look, you pick I said, when you have a free night? And he said, how about Friday night? I said, all right. And I said, you pick a direction, any direction, and we'll go in that, and within 50 to 60 miles, we can probably find some boogers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is when I was, living out there just west of Kirksville. And he picked southeast. And so we headed out and we drove down towards Paris, Missouri. And there's a bridge down there called Union Covered Bridge. And one of the branches of the Salt River goes underneath it. We got off down in there and south of the covered bridge. And I came up to a place where we'd had success before and did some calling. And we actually got a good answer. And looking around on the thermal, we spotted a couple of them that were sneaking up on some deer out in a big field down there.
Wow.
And he was able to tell that, comparing the size of looking through the thermal, comparing the size of the deer to the size of the humanoid images in the thermal, that wasn't a human. and that he wanted, he decided he wanted to get out of there. And I said, well, are you satisfied? He said, no. And he said, that could have been just some big old poacher or something. I said, they weren't carrying guns. He said, well, would guns show up in a thermal? I said, well, you got a point there. Probably not, unless they'd been shooting it. And anyway, I'm Michael X. I like that. So we went down to another place where I had heard a lot of reports, but I never had gotten to go down there. And it was down in Mark Twain State Park. So we went down there, and it was my first time there. We got out and waited around a bit, and I had my big old German Shepherd Griff with me, and Griff was brave. He wouldn't run off when the boogers would get close, but he'd let you know they were coming, and from where. And I made a couple of calls, and all of a sudden we were near a creek where a creek dumped out into Mark Twain Lake, and up the creek we got a loud answer. I mean, really loud answer. And here they came. They were coming towards us, and the old boy that was with me, he was about to mess himself, because he could hear them. They were tearing through the brush and everything, coming closer to us, and you could hear it.
Yeah. And
Griff got into defense mode in front of me, and he got his head down, his hackles all stood up. And finally, this old boy, he couldn't stand anymore, and he broke and ran. And this is one of those ramps down there where you have to park your vehicle about 200 yards up the hill, and you couldn't drive it down onto the ramp. And we were standing down on the boat ramp, and he goes running up there, and I said, look, you don't want to be up there by yourself when these things get here. And he turned around, he ran back down the hill where I was, and he was, what are we going to do with it? I said, we're just going to stand still. And he, and about that time, about a softball size rock, piece of riprap, came flying out of the brush and everything, and landed right out and beside us, about 10 feet away, in the edge of the water. And he like to die. And I told him, just stand still. They won't hit you. They're just trying to intimidate us. And he finally calmed down a little bit. And I said, do you want to see one? And he said, yeah. And so I said, all right, I want you to get behind me. And I said, they're right down there. And there was a bunch of Johnson grass about 35 yards straight south of us. It was pretty high. It was head high or better on me. And we could see it in the moonlight. And I said, all right, they're right in there behind that, in or behind that Johnson grass. I said, get behind me. And I said, look right down my arm, and I'm going to, flip on this spotlight. And I said, now, I said, I don't know how many there are, but there's, more than one of them. And I said, they may all instantly drop, and you're only going to just get a glimmer of eye shine as they're dropping to the ground. I said, but there's a chance that there might be one in there that's going to stand there and confront us. And I said, this light, he won't charge into this light. I said, just trust me on that. And so he got behind me, and I told him, I said, you look straight down my arm like we're shooting a deer or something. And he did, and I flipped that light on, and sure enough, there were two of them out there. The one on our left instantly dropped down, but he saw it. The other one bowed up and screamed at us and about blew our hats off our head. And he just stood there and yelled and screamed and started ripping up brush and pieces of Johnson grass and slinging them around. And about that time, here comes another rock, about a 6 or 8 inch. Shut up, Spencer. Bounced it off the ramp near us, and the old boy he couldn't get his feet to stand still, and we need to go, we need to go. And I said, no, I said, hang on just a minute now. And he got to see him. He got to see us from about, the mid, a little bit higher than mid chest on up, probably just below his pecs on up. He got to see him pretty closely and pretty good. About that time, across the creek from us, there was one cut loose, and I mean, it was obviously this was the alpha, and he and there was sounded like about a suitcase size rock landed out there about 20 feet from us out in that water, and then it hit the water. I had just enough time to swing around and shine my spotlight over there, and that dude hit the water, and it sounded like you threw a semi into the water. And I said, now it's time to go. Why? You know what I'm saying? I said, no, you don't. I said, you don't want to. I said, that's big boy. You don't want to be standing here when he comes up out of that water and comes up his ramp. I said, let's go now. And so we opened up a extra large, super fast acting can of Gone and got out of there. And I tell you, at that point, I weighed about probably 30 pounds more, 35 pounds more than what I weigh now. And boy, my tongue was hanging out by the time we got back up that ramp to the truck. We jumped in and left, and that dude was down there screaming his head off. Anyway, so we're going back up the hill, and we get off the boat landing area, and we had to go right by a campground up there that was part of the state park, and we got blue lighted. And there was a pissed off park ranger stopped us. And he said, that was you down there stirring up those Bigfoot. And I said, oh, well, yeah. And he said, and he let out a stream of cuss words. And he said, look, we had a sighting up here this evening. And he said, I just now got everybody calmed down. Now you're stirring them up again. He said, you get your asses out of here. If I catch you back in here again doing this, he said, I will arrest you for disturbing the wildlife. Yes, sir, we're gone. And, I used to get teased at work about it. And come Monday, when we were back at work, the teasing had stopped. That old boy, everybody had believed him. and I had several other employees asked me to take them out after that. But anyway,
that alpha, that's what you call separating the men from the boys, right?
You got that right. There wasn't any doubt about it that what we were hearing was one of the betas or the omegas that were right there close to us. Probably one of the older juveniles, and anyway, we when Big Boy cut loose, it wasn't any doubt he was the HBIC. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up. You're
on a roll, man.
Speaking of bears, I'm gonna tell this real quick. Right here, a little bit over a quarter mile straight east of where I'm sitting, there's a county park, and there's a campground, a couple of campgrounds in it, and I heard a bunch of racket over there. This has been, I guess now it's been 3 years ago. I heard a bunch of racket over there one evening, but and it was boogers on my property, but they were right there up against the campground property. And I ran into the director of the campground a couple of days later, and And I had mentioned to him about Bigfoot being around here and asked him if he'd ever seen him. Oh, no, there ain't no Bigfoot around here. I ain't never seen nothing. And I said, well, I heard a bunch of yelling, and I ran into him at the grocery store, and I said, you know, I heard a bunch of racket over there next to y'all. He said, yeah. He said, we had some excitement. And I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. He said, there was a dadgum bear come up out of that holler there on your property and stepped over the fence and walked down the hill and just sat down and watched everybody out there cooking out and everything. And he just sat there. And I said, he stepped over the fence.
Yeah, bear stepped over the fence.
Right. And that is a 7-strand gaucho wire fence. It's up to about here on me. And there ain't no bear going to step over that.
Nope.
And ain't no bear going to walk down the hill and just sit down and sit there and watch the people. I said, how long was he there? He said, oh, he was there about 30, 45 minutes. And then we looked around and he was gone. And I said, that wasn't a bear. Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, we all thought it was a bear. And I've often wondered if he really thought it was a bear or if he knew what it was but didn't want to scare the campers. But I don't know.
Well, last bear I had here, it went through the fence, not over it, and then sat there and watched.
Yeah.
String bean. Yeah.
I'm gonna tell one. You talk about these skeptics.
That's a good one,
talk
Dorothy.
about these skeptics, and my dad he's the biggest skeptic we have. My sister and I, and a couple of years ago, I had to. He lives up in the city of St. Charles. Kunbo knows St. Charles, being a Missourian. Oh, yeah. And it's part of Metro St. Louis, right? 2.5, 3 million people. You're there. They're in the population, and I had to go up to take him to a doctor appointment, and we were up there the evening before. I was going to spend the night with him, and he started giving me a hard time about the Bigfoot stuff, and I said, "Look, they got a conservation area in St. Charles County. It's called Weldon Spring Conservation Area. It's on the Missouri River. It's about 6 or 7 miles from Dad's house." I said, "Look, let's just get in the car. Let's just run down there." And I had no idea what to expect. I just knew it was water, woods, and cover, right? And I said, "Let's just go take a ride down there and just see what we can drum up tonight. See what we can hear." Oh yeah, sure. He's up to that. So we get in the car. He drives, and we get down to this conservation area. Now there's a recreational bike trail that runs the entire state of Missouri on the Missouri River called the Katy Trail.
Katy Trail, yeah.
And
I've researched on the Katy Trail.
Yeah, so they've got the Katy Trail. There's a parking lot goes in. The Katy Trail's running there. We go down there. We park the car. It's about 30 minutes before dark. All these bicyclists, these recreational bicyclists, are finishing their bike rides, and they're putting their bikes up and getting in their vehicles and leaving. And we're just sitting there, windows down, sitting in the vehicle, just kind of talking. And when the last cyclist takes off in the vehicle, up on the ridge line, you hear one distinct tree knock, loud tree knock. And my skeptical dad says, "That just sounded like a tree knock." I said, yeah, it did. So we sit there for 10 more minutes and we don't hear anything. And so I normally don't make any vocalizations myself. I normally don't do that because they know I'm here, and it's kind of cheap imitations and stuff like that. But he's running out of patience, and he's kind of razzing me, even though he heard the tree knock. So I said, well, let me see if I can prime the pump a little bit. So I let out a couple of whoops, and as soon as I let the whoop out, you hear another tree knock, and then several yards down the ridge, you hear a second tree knock. And he hears these tree knocks, and then you hear a vocalization, a loud scream, and then you hear a second one. And then the next thing you know, for about 15 seconds, the whole ridge line lights on fire with Bigfoot vocalizations. Screaming, hooting, hollering, whooping, loud owls, everything. And then they just quit. And my dad gets scared to death. He is terrified now. He ain't never heard anything like that in his life. He's hunted all his life. He's like, that wasn't an owl. Those weren't coyotes. And let's get out of here. And starts the vehicle up, and he's kicking rocks out of this 80-something years old, out of this conservation area back home. And he gets home, and we get home, and we walk in the door, and my mom says, "Did you hear anything?" He says, a couple coyotes. But then, so my sister was jealous. She was jealous of that experience. She come home a couple weeks later, went back out there. He would never turn the motor off the vehicle. She says, "We're not going to get any noise if you keep the motor running." Well, I'm not going to turn the motor off in case we can't get it back started. So, anyway.
My dad told me a few things about them, but he wouldn't tell me very much. And my mom tried to several times started to tell me some stuff, and Daddy hushed her up.
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal was. And this is after I was an adult, and
yeah, wonder why they would want you to know that. So
I don't know. But Mama tried to talk to me one time, and one time we were having a family get together, and my mother and my aunt wanted to tell me some stuff, and Daddy hushed them up. And I don't know what was going on. And
a lot of people don't like to talk about it.
They don't want to talk about it.
They don't want to admit it. They don't want to. They just want it to go away. That's the way a lot of people's attitude are about it.
We had several encounters with when my dad and I were out hunting or fishing. And then growing up, we had several encounters with them when we were together, and I never could figure out why he didn't want to talk about them. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that, there was tons of stuff my dad wouldn't talk about, like all the stuff happened when he was in World War II. And,
right. That's understandable.
Yeah. But he just wouldn't talk about them. But one time we ran into one. We were out fishing one day down the river here, about 25 miles down the river, down the Tennessee River from here, and up in a place called Coffee Slough. And we had a thing happen there, but in Coffee Slough, which was about 8-9 miles, probably about 10-12 miles from here, but about 25-30 miles down the river. One time we were bass fishing. It was fairly early in the season. It's when the bass were spawning, and I got my lure hung up. We were fishing with a jig and pig. Those things, they sink as soon as you big heavy lead jig with a pork rind on the back of it. We were casting up over some of what we call at the base of some of the red banks where they spawn. And Greg, what are you doing?
Well, I've got an emergency. My wife just called, and I reckon my young'un probably gonna have to send him. Probably got to take him to urgent care, or maybe the emergency room. He got off. He's redheaded, looks like a struck match, and he decided on the 4th to go swimming with some buddies in a pool, and he's got horrible sunburn on his neck, his back, his shoulders. And ain't no need listening to Daddy, who's been burnt like horribly, severely, terribly a bunch of times. And, you know, they won't listen to me on how to treat it. So now, after a couple of days of agonizing pain, he's hurting really bad. And she said he's about to squall because he's itching horribly and it's burning bad. And they don't know what to do. So I'm fixing to have to run home and try to doctor on him and possibly carry him to urgent care. That's why I had to jump off just a second ago, because Wanda kept beeping in. And she finally texts me. She's like, answer your dang phone. We got an emergency. So, hey, daddy's duties.
Yep.
Tell
Get
him
it
to
taken.
take a
Get it
bath
taken
in
care
some
of.
baking soda.
Well, I'm telling
Misty, that's
tell him he
crazy
needs.
talk. You can't,
It'll help.
you can't. I know. Look, I got it. Hang on a second. I'll be right back.
Tell him I'm gonna come down there and whoop his butt.
Well, you know, it don't. You know, you can't try the remedies that work, like the baking soda and the vinegar. You know, take paper towels and soak it with.
Yeah. You're cutting
Yeah.
out, Greg, but yeah, anybody that gets sunburnt, baking soda baths or
If you
apple cider vinegar.
if he's gonna act like that, I'm gonna come down there and pick him up tomorrow morning and bring him up here, and I'm gonna let him get out here and dig up my dadgum septic tank lines that need to be fixed and replaced.
Look, man, I'll tell you what, I've had sunburn so bad on me, because you can see my red beard. Well, a lot of it's gray now, but anyway,
Yeah.
I told us, look, y'all had blisters bigger than her. And this is what's going to happen. You just don't know. You don't know things. So,
Yeah.
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 Until it comes down to, oh crap, we don't know what to do. Where's Daddy? So, yep, that's the story of my life. Yep. You know, it went sideways. Where's Daddy? You know.
I'm saying I was
Hey,
outside for about 30 minutes, and you seen how dark I was. I was starting to get red, and I don't burn easy.
Yeah.
I can imagine how he got burnt.
Oh, he looked like a damn struck match.
Oh,
I mean, it's
Well,
horrible.
he's probably got blisters on him.
Oh, he looks like the top bulb on a red light.
man.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, that's what he looks like.
He's maybe going into shock. You know, that stuff's bad. Well,
I mean, it's been 48 hours, but I mean, I think probably it's weighing on him that the itching and the pain and all of it's rolled up into one. So yeah. So y'all, I hate it, but let me jump off here where I can drive on the whole 7 miles to the house. And I'll keep everybody posted. But
Yeah, get it
hey,
taken care of, Greg. So hopefully,
y'all in good hands. Y'all got Coonbo and Misty. So
No, we're about to end it too. We're about done. Spencer can't be on here either. I don't even know what's going on. I apologize, but I'm about to end it too.
All right.
You know, I can't do it by myself.
Mike, thanks for coming on. Coonbo, brother, I'll holler at you in a little bit.
hey,
Everybody
anytime.
all right.
Anytime, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Well, big love to everybody, and I'll catch y'all later.
So,
Greg, tell him if he needs anything or whatever, y'all just call. All right. Sorry, y'all. Let's see.
Yeah. So, dang, I hate that.
That's what I'm saying.
3D havoc. He probably has blisters on him.
probably.
If he's already itching, yeah, he's probably already got.
The burn is now
blisters.
developing into the blisters and stuff like that, which is causing that itch. And he's going to have a rough couple days, but he'll eventually be okay.
Yeah. So
somebody asked if my sister and I go out and booger. We don't, because we live several hundred miles away from each other. She's in Texas and I'm up here in Missouri. So when we do a couple times a year, we can get together. It's usually a family thing. So we don't really get to go out very often together and do anything. We have once or twice. That's about it. So
hang on, you do have some questions. Let me go back into them. Let's see.
I'm gonna slide over here. I'm gonna be in earshot, but I'm gonna be out of the camera for just a minute.
Okay.
But I can hear what y'all are talking about.
But Misty, I haven't been able to keep up with all the questions.
I haven't either, and I apologize. My internet's been crazy. I've got people coming in and out, so I have to keep muting my computer, and I'm trying to go back and check them all. But I'm sure I've missed some.
I saw somebody said something about the 1941 UFO thing in Cape, and I personally don't see a connection with the UFOs and Bigfoot, but we have had activity in this area with UFOs. Just across the river in Illinois, the Grand Tower UFO that Joe Turry did that documentary about not too long ago that's been out talks about the Grand Tower stuff. Well, where Grand Tower, Illinois is, that's where the Big Muddy River runs into the Mississippi River. Everybody's heard about the Big Muddy Monster over in southern Illinois. Where I do the bulk of my research is where Apple Creek runs into the Mississippi River, which is directly across the river from where the Big Muddy runs into it. So it's active with all kinds of stuff, especially the Sasquatches and on both sides of the river there. So that kind of clarifies what I know about that, but I never have developed a connection between the two though.
Yeah. Well, have they ever thrown stuff at you?
The only thing I had thrown directly at me was hickory nuts. And I felt that was kind of a playful thing. And this was young. We were young. There were three of us at the time. And it was tossing. He was up there in the ridge. He was tossing hickory nuts down at us, coming through the tree canopy and bouncing around us and occasionally hitting us. And maybe two of them. I'm pretty sure there were two of them because there's a lot of hickory nuts for one to be thrown. And I saw, it was dusk. It was right around dusk, and I saw a glimpse. I saw that they looked like just a dark shadow hopping from behind one tree to another one about 15 feet away from each other. It looked like a dark shadow. I said, that had to be him. And I'm trying to get a good focus on seeing what's going on. And the two guys I was with start getting a little excited about the situation. And then one of them had an AR-15 on his shoulder, and he unshouldered it and cocked it. And as soon as he did that, all the activity was done and it was dusk, and it was like, let's just get back to the car at this point. But I thought, why do you do that for? Because I was starting to get into it a little bit and have a little fun with it. But the rocks and stuff, the stuff has been thrown into not directly at us, but just in the vicinity. Like, hey, that's just let you know I'm here. You know, we'd be fishing in the little pond, the big pond or whatever. We'd be fishing. All of a sudden, something come flying through the trees and land in the middle of the water. I'm here.
Yeah, we have that happen a lot too.
Things like somewhere. The only time I've actually had anything thrown at me with the intention of hitting me was when it was really small stuff like acorns or hickory nuts, or little bitty tiny like pea gravel or something.
And I saw that as playful activity more than anything else.
Yeah, that's the Juvies messing with us.
And the one time we saw this wasn't too long ago. We saw about a year ago the green orb. My buddy says, "Look at that green orb floating around over there." And as soon as he said that, like a piece of firewood type log comes flying through the trees and lands about 30 or 40 feet from us. And it's like if they want to get that thing closer to you, they can get it closer to you. They're just like getting your attention. And I think it's kind of cool when they do that. So,
yeah, I anybody that's listened that's regular on this show here has heard me tell this story at least a half a dozen times, but I've only ever seen two people that were hit by a booger thrown rock or anything like that where it could have hurt them. And one of them, the first time it happened, myself and the research partner I had, that we both worked for the Missile Command at the time, and we were stationed at White Sands Missile Range. and we were up at a state park just east of the missile range that sort of nestled up against the Mescalero Apache Indian Reservation.
Let's say you're up there in the Sacramento Mountains.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, we were right up there. Yeah, exactly. We were up there in the north end. We were north of Cloudcroft.
Okay.
So you know that area. You know where Three Rivers is?
Well, my daughter works at White Sands. She's works for the Department of Defense there. Now I just been out there a couple times, and I hadn't had a chance to do much more than just drive through it. But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I spent a little over 3 years out there, all totaled up. But anyway, we had gone to this state park, and we're just checking around. And this is one of those ones where it was not very well, wasn't real popular. There were only, in the whole park campground, there might have only been 4 to 6 people that were in there. And it was obvious that some of them had been living in there for a while. And there was this hippie guy, oh, wow, man, yeah, you some weed, leftover hippie guy that lived there. And anyway, we came driving up. We were in a government vehicle, and he was outside when we came driving up, and notice he sort of got, real fast, picking up things, and he was living in just what you would expect, an old VW van, believe it or not, one of the old VW camper vans.
Oh,
had the little awning that came out. That's what he was living in. Anyway, so we were up there and noticed that there was a little old wet weather creek that came down right there, not far from his van. And that's where in about 45, 50, at most 50 yards from his van was the dumpster. And I just asked him, I said, you ever see anything messing around that dumpster at night or anything like it? Yeah, man. Yeah, those Sasquatches come down here just about every night. And they look around, they walk around here, and if you don't put your garbage in that dumpster, they'll just come get it, get it right out of your yard right there. And he said, but I always put my stuff in the dumpster. I don't like them up here messing around my van. And he said, some of them things, when they walk by, I can't even see their shoulders. They're so tall. And I said, and my buddy was looking at me like, yeah. And he said, they come down right out of that draw right there. Well, the thing about it is, though, as I reminded him after we got away from talking to that guy, I said, dude, remember that cowboy? Because the east line of that park was the reservation, the Apache res.
Yeah. The
north, the south, and the west line, they were surrounded on 3 sides by a ranch. I mean, a big ranch, 100 square mile ranch. And I said, remember we were talking to that cowboy that had told us about, seeing them disappear over there in those, what they call a tank. A tank is a pond out there, a cow pond out there. And I said, remember that? And I said, remember he told us that up here by this campground that he had seen them come down this draw right here, and on the north side of the campground and the state park. And he said, oh yeah. I said, we need to go up that draw. So that's what we did. We parked and we started going. The old guy said, hey man, I wouldn't go up there if I was y'all. We're like, we'll be all right. Everything's cool. We'll be all right. Oh no, man. I said, you don't go either. No. So we went up there, and we got about I don't know, 200-300 yards up that draw, and all of a sudden, about a dadgum grapefruit-sized rock comes flying over us, and lands. It comes from the north side of the draw, and it went over us, and it landed back behind us. And Clyde and I just looked at each other and grinned, and we kept on going. Well, then, hell, here comes from like the southeast. Here comes another rock, and it it hit out in front of us and ricocheted off the side of the draw. And this is just a wooden, just a rock wash. There was no, maybe it's a little bit of sand and stuff. It was mostly just big granite rocks.
Yeah.
And we got up there, and the further we went, the more rock throwing. And then smaller rocks were coming in and hitting closer to us. And we got to a point where there was a little side draw that went off sort of to the southeast. And you could tell that there'd been a lot of traffic up and down that they'd been crawling up and down it, because the rock there was sort of worn slick, and it was sort of greasy looking, I guess, from the oil and stuff on their hair, and they'd been up and down there so much. And I said, I'm gonna go up in there, and my buddy said, I don't think I can make it. And I said, well, you just wait here. I'm gonna crawl up there. And I couldn't go right up the way that they'd been going. I had to crawl around from the side. And I did that. And when I got up in there and stood up, they opened up the artillery on me. And there were rocks coming and hitting all around me from 3 or 4 directions. And it was obvious that I was somewhere I didn't need to be. So I decided it was time to get out of there. So I came down, and I just slid right down there where they'd been sliding up and down, or crawling up and down. And we started back down the draw. And we'd gone about 40 or 50 yards at the most, and about a cantaloupe size to softball size to grapefruit size, maybe at the most small, like I said, small cantaloupe size rock came sailing over us and hit out in front of us, and hit a granite rock and ricocheted off that rock, and hit another rock, ricocheted off that, and hit my buddy right in the left shin bone. And it took him down. I thought, oh my God, it's broken his leg. And he hollered, and he was actually out in front of me. And he said, I'm okay. And I said, are you sure? He said, yeah. I said, well, let me help you up. And we stood up, but what we noticed, all of the rock throwing had stopped. Everything had stopped. It was dead quiet. You could have heard a pin drop up in there. But so it was obvious, and we both realized that was a total accident, that they didn't mean to hit him, that they were just throwing those rocks to keep us moving out of there. And then, so years later, we were camped at a campground, at a state park campground, about 30 miles or so from here, something like that, 30, 35 miles from here. And Vicky Fulcher was with us. Dan, that's you've heard a bunch of us. Y'all have heard us talking about Dan and Vicky. And we were up under pavilion, and the boogers, they were bombarding us with rocks on the roof of the pavilion. And they were coming from a couple of 3 different directions, just messing with us. It was juvies. And there was a rock, pretty good size, what we call a chunking rock. It was about, it was about that big.
Good throwing.
Hit the roof. Yeah, good throwing rock. Hit the roof, bounced off, hit a tree, ricocheted off the tree, and hit Vicky right here in her, right above her right hip. And she still got the rock, by the way. And boy, and again, everything all the rock throwing stopped instantly, and everything got just quiet as a mouse. But those are the two people I've known that have been hit by rocks that could have could have hurt you, and both times were clearly an accident. Hey, Spencer.
There's Spencer. Kunbo's telling all these stories, and all these people were asking me questions, so I finally had to start typing them in. Yeah, but I could sit there and listen to Kunbo talk for a long time on this stuff.
Well, it's your show. I need to shut up.
It's not my show.
Kunbo, damn it, this thing keeps freezing up on me. I invited Kunbo on because he lived in Missouri for so long. It natural perspective into a lot of the stuff that you're talking about and everything.
Well, let me interrupt and say something, because Kunbo and I, we may have met at that LBL thing last year that I was at, but we never really interacted or talked with each other until today. But my nephew follows my stuff with Bigfoot, and I guess it was probably 6 months ago he sent me something that Kunbo had done, one of the podcast or documentary or one of the shows he's been on, showing evidence. And he asked me, he says, "Do you know this guy?" I said, "Well, I know of him." I said, and his work is legitimate. He goes, that's what I'm saying. So now I get to go back and tell my nephew, "Hey, you have to go out and watch this." I said, I just sat there and listened to Kunbo tell one story after another. It's awesome.
You ever
get going?
Do you ever researched anywhere over around Columbia?
The only places that I really have researched is North Cape County, and then over in Madison County, outside of the Fredericktown area, a couple different places over there. And really with everything else, job and other family commitments that don't involve Sasquatch, I don't really have time to get to very many other places right now and do anything. Outside of that trip out to Weldon Spring up there in St. Charles that night, but I haven't.
Have you ever heard mention of I'm not going to say his last name. Well, that's nice, Lene. Guy named Ken, that's a good researcher, lives up in the St. Louis area. He took me out. Yeah, I'm not going to say his name on the air, but anyway, he's from over there near down I-40. What is it? 44 that goes
44
southwest. Yeah, he's from down off of 44 down there, sort of the headwaters of the what's that river that goes through like.
Well, you get the Merrimack. They got the Merrimack River.
Right,
the Merrimack River kind of runs up 44.
Right, he's from one of those little towns that's up there around the headwaters of the Merrimack River. Is where he's from.
You go down. You go down. There's Steelville. There's
exactly.
Sullivan, St. Clair.
He grew up outside of Steelville.
Okay,
is where he grew up, and they had a lot. He grew up around them just like I did. And
they're all over down in that area.
That place is eat up with them.
Yeah,
but he lives in the St. Louis area now. That's where his work is. But he took me out one time, and we went to St. Charles and drove up. If I'm looking at the right road, this has been, like I said, it was before I even lived up there. So this is in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
And we went up, I think, what's called Washian Road. And we drove up towards the Mississippi River.
Okay, you're
north
North St. Charles, yeah.
Right, north of St. Charles, right. And
up there close to where the Missouri and the Mississippi run into each other.
right, up in the confluence area. And there's been a lot of sightings in that area.
Okay.
But he took me up there, and we were in that may not be the right road, because you get up there and there's a little industrial area, and there's some railroad tracks that go through there.
Right.
And we went up and actually parked on the railroad tracks, because being out in the tracks are straight as an arrow through there, so you could see 2 or 3 miles in either directions. So if a train was coming, you'd have plenty of time to get off of there. But we parked right there by the railroad tracks, and we got out and did some calling, and it was like what you said, that the place sort of lit up. It came alive.
Yeah.
And he had a wasn't a thermal. He actually had a night vision scope, and he was looking around, and he happened to be looking back up the track to the northeast, and the tracks going through there sort of run sort of northeast or east northeast to sort of west southwest. And anyway, he was looking back up the track to the east, and there was a big one standing out there in the tracks, just sort of hunched over how they do, looking at us.
Yeah.
And I saw him just. He handed the thing to me, and I saw it for just a glimpse, and before he stepped aside. I think he could see. I was in the passenger side, and that was the side towards him. And I think when he saw me come out the window with it, I'm sure he might have thought I had a weapon or something, because I just got a glimpse. As soon as I saw him, he turned and went into the. But man, that's a bushy, brushy, boogery place up there, along that railroad track.
And we never even gave it a thought growing up. Growing up there, and of course we were always busy playing ball and stuff like that, but didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
But it's they're Missouri. They're all over Missouri. Just people ask, all the people on the chat from the different parts of the state. They're all over the state they say where they. I said, find the water, find the cover, find their food sources, and you'll find them. Well, it doesn't have to be out in the middle of nowhere. They get real close to the population as well.
Yes, sir. I have taken a couple of good, legit reports out of Lake St. Louis area.
Wow. Okay.
Believe it or not. Yeah, right there where 64 goes through.
Probably Dardine Creek bottoms, probably up
in that Weldon area. Springs, that area.
Weldon Springs.
Weldon Springs.
And then right next door to Weldon Spring Wildlife Area is Bush Wildlife Area.
It's Bush, right.
You got a couple of wildlife areas there, and very, very, a lot of places for them to hide. So.
Well, see, back in the day, I don't know who owns Bush now, but back in the day, Bush was private. It was owned by the Adolph Bush family.
Owned by the brewery. Owned by the brewery.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So, and they had their own. I guess you'd call them. They're not really game wardens as far as being a state employee, but they had their own wardens and wildlife managers. I guess that's what you'd call them, because you could go book a hunt in there.
Yeah.
And
it's all part of Missouri Department of Conservation now, but
right.
But they had their own
back in the day. Back in the day, I used to be very active in Ducks Unlimited, and I was on the state of Alabama, area committee, and I've gone to some of the national Ducks Unlimited deals, and we had one that was. There was some kind of a big shindig that they had out there at Bush Wildlife one time. And that's the only time I've ever set foot on the place. And I got to talking to one of their employees, one of their, I guess you'd call him a wildlife manager. And I just, something told me I ought to ask him. I did. And he, Robert D. Have I heard of loin men? Park rangers had a shootout with them a while back. I have not heard about them. Anyway, I talked to this guy, and he said, and he sort of he said, let's go over here. And we stepped away from most folks. He said, yeah. He said, they're all up and down the river here. He said, they come and go up and down the river. And he said, they're going into town. I said, yep. And I got telling him about, urban Bigfoot and stuff. And he was absolutely amazed. But, I told him that, we'd found them on Staten Island, New York, believe it or not, in 2 different places, believe it or not.
Well, I know of activity in St. Louis County. There's a lot of activity in St. Charles County, and you're getting up there, right there, Metro St. Louis, population, 3 million people, east side and the Illinois side. So it's not. I mean, I've got evidence of them coming right up. Cape Girardeau's about 40,000 population. I got evidence of them coming right up to the city limits. So,
yeah. Well, you know where High Ridge is?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a guy that he was the last person that I would ever have talked to. He was an official, he was a pretty high official in an organization that I associated with back in the day, back before I retired and moved back to Alabama. But anyway, he lived outside of High Ridge, and I would have never ever dreamed of mentioning Bigfoot around this guy, but somehow he had stumbled across a podcast with me on it, and we were at a meeting, and he just flat asked me and about it, and by that time I had quit trying to hide it and cover it up, and I said, I research them, and he said, are they around there? And I said, well, yeah. I said, they're around there a lot. I said, I've encountered them in up there in St. Charles. And I said, I've encountered them down in, I've taken reports of them down around Potosi and, like I said, Gray Summit and Pacific. And, and I was telling him about, and I said, and down around Steelville and Huzzah and the big, national forest down there. I said, they're all over the place. And then so he told me what had happened there around their house. And he said, are we in danger? And I said, no. I said, the only way you're going to be in danger is if you shoot at them. And God help you if you hit one of them.
Oh, man.
And I said, and I told him what to do, about to keep them away a little bit better. And is Aunt Verby on there?
Yep.
I see. I don't see her. Hi, Aunt Verby.
Yeah, she's on there. She said she.
Okay. But anyway, people don't realize. Most folks have no idea, how these things.
That's what got me into it when I discovered the existence. I'm like, how come they're out here in 95% or better of the country has no clue? People tell me, they'll run into me. Well, I've seen you on those podcasts. I just want to let you know, I've hunted those same woods all my life, and I've never seen anything what you're talking about. Well, maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't, but I can tell you this from my experience: once you see the evidence, then you cannot unsee the evidence. Then you'll everywhere you go. Once you know what you're looking for, and with the prints, with the tracks, with the tree manipulations, once you know what to listen for, once you know what to listen for as well, when that branch breaks with no wind blowing, it's like it's like once you know what to listen for, what to observe, then you cannot unsee the evidence. And that's what I try to explain to people, that and when I do take them out, then you explain to me what it is. I tell you, explain to me what it is. We went out a couple weeks ago. I had a guy from up St. Charles contacted me off one of these podcasts and wanted me to show him evidence, show him how to find the tracks and that. He had a sighting a few years back. He's interested in this stuff. So he met me down. We went out there. We looked and we cast a 10-inch track that day. 11-inch track, cast it. But it was a perfect step. And I told him, let's hold off and see if we find a better one. Well, we came back and cast that one. And that was on a Thursday. And on the Saturday, that very Saturday, I was speaking at the Big Muddy Festival over in Murfreesboro, Illinois. This was just June the 21st, I guess. And I brought that, I just dug that cast out of the ground on Thursday before that. And I brought my 17-inch cast and then my buddy's 15-inch female cast, which was much narrower than the male. And my whole talk on the Big Muddy was all these casts were cast within a year of each other, within a half mile of each other in the same creek bottom that flows into the Mississippi River. I said, and it shows a breeding, healthy population of Sasquatch is what it shows. That they are out there. It shows that, and that's you know, still when we get a chance to take people out, show them evidence and stuff like that. So it's it's one of my favorite things to do.
Larry Berlin asks, how many days does the average hunter spend in the woods? Well, the average deer hunter in Missouri spends 1 or 2 days.
Yeah, not many.
You only kill one buck.
You're not now. Some people that have the
gun
property, maybe more, but very few.
Right. Well, the gun season in Missouri only lasts a week.
Now,
and you've got a few more days of muzzleloader or primitive weapon.
They got different bow, but not many in their bow season. But I'm going to tell you something. A few years ago, we went up my son was up there hunting, so I went up to the conservation area up there, near the parking lot. One of the parking lots up there, there are about a dozen vehicles up there parked in the parking lot. Yeah, I just got my lawn chair out and just sat and as it got to dusk, as soon as a hunter would get into the parking lot, about 50 to 75 yards off the parking lot, you'd hear a real loud whoop. And then when the next hunter got off the parking lot, you hear it again. They had one watching the parking lot. And then when the last hunter got into the parking lot, of course you heard it one more time. And my theory on that was they knew how many people parked their vehicles there and how many hunters were in the woods. Each whoop, hunter out, hunter out, hunter out. And then when the last hunter got out and it's turning dark now, it lets them signal to the others, okay, we are now free to roam the woods without the danger of getting shot at. And you talk about intelligence. I mean, that's a very high level of thinking on their part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went and investigated a place up in Iowa on the Skunk River up in Iowa, and it was a small conservation area there, and there was a boat ramp on it, and an old guy that was an old commercial fisherman. Now I was amazed that you'd have a commercial fisherman on a river that small, but he claimed to be a commercial fisherman, and he said that every time he comes in there, that he pulls up and he's starting to launch his boat, he says he hears a knock up there on the levee, and he said that when he comes back, he says he'll hear a whistle, just this is, you'll hear it if you listen for it. You'll hear it a lot if you're listening, but it's just like that. Just actually more flat than that. It's just a little flat monotone whistle, sort of like that.
Yep.
And he said that somebody left a car in a truck sitting. They left a truck and a boat trailer sitting in the parking lot overnight because they got off down the river and had trouble with their boat, and they had to come out at another bridge. And they eventually got there. They got somebody to help them get their motor going, their boat going. They came back up the river and they'd been gone. I don't know if they had it tied up, but he said that the truck and trailer had been sitting there for a day and a half, something like that. When they got back, up the river at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, he said they came out. They pulled up to the ramp, and he said when they got out, were walking up the ramp, and I don't remember what kind of a call I can't remember off the top of my head what kind of call he said he heard, but he said it was very obvious that they had disturbed something going on up there. He said he heard a bunch of racket, and said that they had lights on their boats. He said he flipped on the lights, shined up there in the parking lot. And he said all he heard was a bunch of crashing, running and stuff back through the brush and up the levee. But I had a friend of mine that was going to be up there doing some stuff, and I couldn't get away right then. So I asked him to go up there, and I told him how to get to this ramp. And he did. And he got there, and he found a trail leading from the ramp up onto the levee. And he got up there maybe 50, 75 yards, and he comes up on a tree, and the bark's beat all to crap. And he found some pretty good sized rocks laying there at the base of the tree that had tree bark embedded in them. So he found, what he found was where they had been using a rock to, whoop on this tree, as part of their communication. And, but Dorothy Wade, Cliff Rockman does a good one. I was doing that owl call back in the 1960s to stir them up.
Wow.
And first time I ever did it. Well, actually, it was in 1967. I was 12 years old. And first time I ever did it, I called one to me, and Dad and I were out fishing. And up in a place called Coffee Slough, which is down the river below Florence and Sheffield and Muscle Shoals. And it heard me, and it started coming. And it was obvious it was coming towards us fast, and it was hollering. And I noticed that the boat was moving out towards the middle of the slough. And then I noticed my dad, he kept reaching down there. This is at that time that you didn't have all the foot controls. You didn't have all the controls where you could do it with your feet. You had to reach down and flip a switch to make the motor go faster, the trolling motor go faster. Next thing I know, Daddy's reaching down there, he clicks that thing up on high. And that slough, we were far enough in it, the water wasn't but about 3 feet deep. And imagine a 10-foot booger running out into 3 feet water. It's be like us running across a mud puddle. And as it was getting closer, my dad told me, "Son, hop down there." And I was up in the casting chair on the back. He said, "Hop down there and fire up the big motor and get us out of here." Yes, sir. I fired it. Yeah.
I'd like to point out earlier, you said there was only 2 times where rocks were thrown at you or people that you were with, but you left out the story about whenever you did the damn calls up at the Natchez Trace and the one through the stick so hard it dented your truck.
Well, yeah, but well, I was there when one threw about a softball sized rock in the back of Dan Ricky's truck and trying to scare his dog Rebel out so they could catch him. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know if you heard this story, Mike. I had heard about this one particular overlook on the Natchez Trace where somebody had gone down there and made a call during the daytime, and like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and a booger come out of the woods and screamed at him. And I mean, showed himself, walked out into a picnic area.
Just here I am. Knock it off.
Yeah, he was the only one there. I mean, he there was nobody else in that little park area, and of course scared him half to death. And so he called me up when he got home later that evening and told me about it. And this was on a Sunday evening. So I said, well, by God, I'll go down there tomorrow afternoon after work, check that place out. So that's what I did. And I just left straight from work and drove down there. I didn't go by and pick up my dog or anything. And I pulled up in the parking lot, and I have a rule that anybody that had never heard me say this, pay attention. If you're going to get out of your vehicle, or you're going to stop your vehicle and do some calling, or you're going to get out of your vehicle and it's someplace besides your driveway, you need to always have your vehicle pointed in a safe way out. So all you got to do is get in it, fire it up, throw it in gear, and mash it, and you're headed out in a safe way out of there. Well, I didn't take my own advice. I pulled up in this parking lot. I got out, and I pulled straight in to a dadgum little narrow, where there were just like 2 or 3 parking spaces and a bunch of big concrete curbs around it. And I got out and did a call. And sure enough, I got an answer from across the road. And so I hollered back, and it answered again. It was obvious that it was coming towards me. Well, I said, okay, I can stand up here on this hill and I can look right down there and see when it crosses the trace. And I'm wondering how come the guy that was doing it and heard it, and it was doing the exact same thing that it had done to the other person the day before. And I said, I don't know why he didn't stand up here and look down there. He could have seen it when it came across the road. You know, how in the world did that thing sneak up on him like that? Anyway, so I'm standing up there, you know, looking off down the hill, looking towards the road, you know, all right, he's coming closer. Then he gets quiet. And I made another little call, not quite as loud. And I'm sitting there looking. Well, I don't see any booger. He must be high over in the woods across the trace, just looking at me, you know, or something. He's scared to come over here. And all of a sudden, that son of a gun cut loose right back behind me. It about blew my hat off. He was so loud.
Wow.
And I about jumped out of my skin. And this is I mean, it scared the crap out of me. And he was mad. He was ripping. There was a bunch of pine trees around there. He was ripping off pine tree limbs and stuff and throwing them and hollering and carrying on and yelling. And anyway, I had to run towards him to get into the truck. I'm talking about like I had to run 40, 50 feet towards him to get to the truck. And I got in that thing and I fired that dude up. And I suddenly realized that, oh my God, that I was a big it's a 2000 model F-250 Super Duty Ford diesel with crew cab. And it was going to take me 3 or 4 jukes to get that thing, you know, pulled around where I could get out of there. So I'm doing that as fast as I can. And right when I made my last little back up and turn and started pulling out of there, I saw that son of a gun. There was a tree limb laying on the ground about probably 4 inches in diameter, maybe 4.5 inches in diameter. And that dude, in about maybe 5 feet long, he bent down, he grabbed that tree limb up. And as I was pulling out, by the way, I'd had this truck 2 weeks. Wasn't even close to making the first payment on it. And he picked that thing up and he reared back and he threw that thing sidearm. And I said, man, he'd make a fine sidearm pitcher in the major leagues. He threw that thing sidearm and it was going flat, wham! Hit my dadgum bed of my truck right above the left rear wheel well. And I never let off of it. I had I didn't have a chip in that truck then. It was just running. It was box stock, but I had my foot in it as hard as it'd go. And when I got to the bottom of the hill, I would have had to turn back sharp to go home. Turn back sharp left to go home. But no, as I was going down the hill, I was looking back behind me, making sure no traffic was coming. And I whooped out on that trace with my foot in it. I went about 5 or 6 miles down the road to the next little pull-off area, and sat there. And I got out and I went back there and looked. And there's a big old crease about 3 feet long in the bed of my truck right above the wheel well. And I said, "Dadgummit!" And of course I couldn't. No way I could turn it in on my insurance. My brand new truck. Booger threw a stick at me. Cancel.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to call. There was an outfit in Tupelo back then called Dent Doctors. I think that was the name of them. And I called them up, and they came up and sucked the dent out of the thing in the parking lot there at work the next day. And it cost me $700 freaking dollars.
Wow.
To get that booger dent sucked out
because
of my truck. Do what, Spencer?
Because you didn't turn the truck around. $700.
Wow.
Right. I didn't take my own advice. Of course, back then, we didn't have these podcasts where I could spread that information around. But now, that's one thing I learned from my dad. My dad taught me that from the time I was a little boy. He said, he said, if you're going to get out of your truck and you ain't in your driveway, or your vehicle and you're not in your driveway, he said, you turn that thing around so you can get out of there fast. And my dad started drilling that into me when I was like 5, 6 years old, and maybe 6 years old. And I didn't take the advice, and it cost me $700. But
there you go.
Anyway.
Well, gentlemen, we are over 2 hours. My phone is going to die any minute, and this internet is unreliable. So I got to take the opportunity to pause it here and to say thank you very much for both of you. Mike, I appreciate you jumping on here and doing the show with us today.
Hey,
Kumbo, thank you so much for contributing.
Anytime. So I enjoyed it.
And we'll get some links posted up. I'll probably do it on the Facebook page. I'll get links posted up of like maybe some of your old shows so people can go back and see some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we got some good
guys. Thank you.
Good interviews on there. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, you do. Everybody,
Mike,
keep the people in Texas.
Yes.
Yeah, that's freaking unbelievable. I thought it when I first saw it. The stuff I thought was some of this AI BS, and I got to digging into it, and it was absolutely for real.
Oh my, yeah.
Actually, the Ass Pucker Road, Leanne. This is at the place that later became Ass Pucker Road, or what we call AP Road.
Hey. Next time we have you on, you got to tell the story about you and James Armstrong getting out with the scatter guns.
Oh no, that was Sammy Armstrong. That was the first stripped down AP. That was yeah. It was James's dad, Sammy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it got the name AP Road. When we finally got out of there, we're about 5 miles down the road. Sammy says, I know what we're gonna name that. And I says, what? We're gonna call that Ass Pucker Road. Yeah. But anyway, by the way, we found out the way they were getting, there was a big ass culvert under the road there. And that's how they were getting under the road and getting over into the picnic area without us seeing it. That's how they were sneaking up on us. They were coming through a freaking culvert, an 8-foot square culvert, big concrete culvert, went under the trace and came out right below the picnic area. And that's how come we weren't seeing them. But
yeah, well,
anyway.
they're smart enough to figure out the path to take where they're not going to expose themselves.
Yeah. Well, those culverts were put in there. I'm 98% sure that those culverts were put in there to begin with, specifically for the boogers could go back and forth across the trace, because there were so many sighting reports coming in all the time. People seeing them.
Keep
and
crossing the road.
In fact, the guy that turned me on to them, that told me what to look for, he worked on he drove a piece of heavy equipment when they were building the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway, and he used to drive the trace in that area twice a day. And he told me, why, he used to see them crossing, several times a week, crossing, going back and forth across the trace. And he made a little comment. He said, ever since they did this drainage project down here and put in a bunch of culverts, I ain't seen one since. And I said, really, where were those culverts at? And he gave me some mile marker numbers. And I went down there, and that's how I found them. And I think Vicky Fulcher was with me. And I took her down there and showed her one of them. And we got way too close to one on that trip. And we got close enough we could smell his breath. And there was a gang of us were down there, but I was wanting to go over and see if I could find one, because I'd been the guy had told me a mile marker that was near this location, really close to it. And Vicky was the only one who had the guts to walk down there with me. And we went over there and we found the culvert, and we ran into a booger right there. I mean, we got close enough to it we could smell its breath. Let's just say that's closer. That's too close for comfort. That son was done if it had been smelled like almost like fermented fruit. It was a mix with really strong concentrated like honeysuckle or something. It was a sick, sweet smell. I mean, that's and I've smelled their breath numbers of times, and it's always sort of a really almost overpowering, sick, sweet smell. At least it is in when there's flowering plants and stuff out. I've smelled it numbers of times. The way I got turned on to that was some folks that I ran into out in Washington State. They're out west of Yakima. And they told me a story that had happened when they were on a camping trip, where they had one came in on them, and it came into their campground. It was sniffing around their tent, and they had one of the little tent windows open just but they had the mosquito netting shut, but the tent flap was tied back or something, and it came up there, and it was looking in the opening, in the tent window, looking in at them and breathing, and they smelled its breath, and they said it was a real strong, sort of a sick, sweet smell. And I'm like, holy crap. I said, I've smelled that before. And so I tried to be more observant of that and found out that that's exactly right. So, and I've run across this in different places around the country. So it's sort of a universal thing. So,
right.
Spence, I've
something
got
to
to
be
get
aware
going.
of.
Okay. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah. No problem. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Kumbo. Everybody watching,
Yeah.
I got off here
yeah.
like pronto, but we'll see y'all next week.
Let's do it again, guys. So,
All right. Mike,
yes.
I need to, have you got my, any of my contact information?
No, but
Spencer, send me some contact information.
I'll do that. I'll get it to you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right.
I'll get it.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. There.
All right.
Have
See
a good
y'all.
night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody,
Bye.
for watching. See y'all. Sorry about
Yeah.
the show being crazy. Bye. See ya.
See ya.